Hello and welcome viewers, I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. We're starting a little early to give you some breaking news developments that are coming in from the United States. Now, congressional Democrats have released dozens of new images that were confiscated earlier from the estate of the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. This comes a day before the U.S. Justice Department was set to release unclassified files from its ongoing investigation of Epstein. From the latest batch of images, some 68 are among the 95,000 images released to the House Oversight Committee earlier. The images show redacted identification cards of women suspected to be belonging to countries such as Russia, Morocco, Italy, Czech Republic, South Africa, Lithuania and Ukraine. Moreover, the new images also picture billionaire Microsoft founder Bill Gates, professor and political activist Noam Chomsky and US President Trump's former aide Steve Bannon. All right, we have David K. Johnston, American author and professor. He's joining us live from New York. Thank you very much, David, for joining us here at NewsX World. It's early morning in India where we are broadcasting from. Talk to us about these new pictures and some startling revelations, startling images of some of the high-profile people, including Bill Gates, Noam Chomsky, Steve Bannon, servicing in the latest release of the files by Democrats.
Well, there are about 95,000 known images from the Epstein files, and the Democrats on Capitol Hill are releasing selective photos here and there to keep up public interest in this issue. The fact that there are men in those pictures does not in any way suggest that they were raping underage girls. Con artists like Jeffrey Epstein, and I've covered many con artists over my 60-year career, they surround themselves with prominent and powerful people to create an aura of influence and invincibility. Frankly, I think the much more important development was the New York Times expose published 24 hours ago about the Epstein-Trump relationship, how Epstein made his money, how the two men bonded over their interest in young women and girls as sex partners. It's a very revealing and sometimes will make your skin crawl story, and it was put together by some of the best reporters on the planet, some whom I know because I was a reporter for many years at the New York Times.
All right. And how do you think 64 more images released today, how are these going to affect the investigation underway?
Well, Friday, U.S. time, is when the new law passed by Congress and signed by Donald Trump requires the U.S. Justice Department to release the Epstein files. And the Democrats want very much to make sure there's public attention focused on this. The expectation is that they will not release all the files, something Trump promised during the campaign that he would do, and will instead find ways to withhold all sorts of material, including what the White House Chief of Staff has told Vanity Fair magazine are many references to Donald Trump. Now, she emphasizes, as does Trump, there's nothing showing that Trump did anything improper with underage girls, but it will be very significant on Friday, U.S. time, to see what is withheld and what is released.
All right. Well, thank you, David, for joining us. For now, we'll of course come back to you to discuss this in more detail. But for now, viewers, it's time for a quick break and we'll be right back.
in the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on?
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. European Union reaches a deal to provide Ukraine with 90 billion euros for 2026 to 27 after failing to agree on using frozen Russian assets to reconstruct war-torn nation. Police say the suspect behind shooting at the Brown University was found dead inside a storage facility in Salem in New Hampshire. A car believed to have been used by the suspect was tracked down to New Hampshire. Australian Prime Minister announces national buyback plan for firearms in a bid to get more guns off the streets in the Bondi beach shooting attack aftermath. Albanese said the scheme would buy surplus, newly banned and illegal firearms. Fresh images released from Epstein's estate by US House Democrats. Images show high-profile figures including Bill Gates, Noam Chomsky, Woody Allen and Steve Bannon. Also reveal island plans and more. Unrest grips Bangladesh after the death of student leader Osman Hadi, who succumbed to injuries sustained in an assassination attempt. Thousands take to streets calling for arrest of the killers. Japan's central bank hikes interest rates to 0.7%, making it the highest level since 1995. A rate hike is likely to strengthen the yen against the dollar and contain inflation. US military strikes two more alleged drug trafficking boats in Eastern Pacific Ocean, killing 5 people. At least 104 people have been killed. US strikes on alleged drug boats. This is the third attack this week. Former NASCAR driver Greg Biffle and his family among 7 killed in plane crash in North Carolina. The business jet went down moments after taking off from the airport. And let's start with the top focus here at the World Report now. Viewers, news coming in from Australia, which is moving ahead toward its largest gun buyback in decades following the deadly Bondi Beach mass shooting. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has announced a nationwide scheme to purchase surplus, newly banned and illegal firearms, calling it the most significant action since the landmark reforms after the 1996 Port Arthur massacre. He said the tragedy at the Bondi showed the urgent need to remove more guns from Australian streets. Let's listen in.
Today, I'm also announcing that the government will establish a national gun buyback scheme to purchase surplus, newly banned and illegal firearms, the largest buyback since the Howard government initiated one in 1996. Australia's gun laws were last substantially reformed in the wake of the Port Arthur tragedy. The terrible events at Bondi show we need to get more guns.
The Australian Prime Minister also declared a National Day of Reflection on December 21, marking 1 week since the attack. Australians are being urged to light candles at 6:47 p.m. local time, the exact moment the shooting began, in solidarity with the Jewish community and all those affected. Albanese said the moment would affirm that hatred and violence do not define Australia. This comes as hundreds gathered at Bondi Beach, paddling out into the water to honor the 15 victims as the nation continues to grieve. Let's listen in.
Federal and New South Wales governments have declared Sunday, 21st of December, a day of reflection to honour the victims of the horrific terrorist attack at Bondi Beach and to stand in solidarity with the Jewish community. This day is about standing with the Jewish community, wrapping our arms around them, and all Australians sharing their grief. And today we've been informed that by the Office of National Intelligence has identified a regular online video feed from ISIS that reinforces that this was an ISIS.
And now joining me in this discussion is David K. Johnston, American author and professor, joins us live from New York. Thank you, David, for continuing to stay with us. Professor, tell us how's this new plan going to help? How much really in gun control and the violence from illegal gun weapon use?
And we know that there is a statistical relationship between the density of gun ownership and the number of incidents, but fundamentally, any one individual or father and son, as in the case of this horrible attack at Bondi Beach, is all it takes to create a problem. Now, Prime Minister Albanese has indicated he's also going to seek some stronger gun laws, including registering guns. And one of the smartest moves governments could make is to require record keeping and disclosure on the purchases of ammunition, so that when someone buys, thousands of rounds of ammunition, that's a pretty good sign that something troublesome may be coming.
Professor Johnston, I also want to discuss this. There's no action per se that can be seen in, as far as the issue of curbing anti-Semitism and terror is concerned. There's been a lot of focus on gun laws and gun license limiting in Australia even after the attack, but not much conversation is coming in regard to anti-Zionist attacks as we just saw.
Well, one of the frequently observed points about racism, anti-Semitism, hatred of people based on their skin color or religion is it's closely related with weak education, with not being well-rounded in your education. In America, after 9/11, the first person killed because the killer thought he was a, quote, Arab, was a Sikh businessman in Arizona. So you're dealing with people who are full of hate, but they're not at all sophisticated about it. And this is something more the area of moral education, where schools and the general public can do a lot to raise moral standards by demonstrating leadership. And I think Albanese is trying to do that in Australia.
All right. Well, thank you for your opinion on that, but do stay on, Professor Johnston, as we move on. Viewers, let's tell you that once again, news on the Epstein files and the new images that have emerged now. Congressional Democrats have released dozens of new images that were confiscated earlier from the estate of Jeffrey Epstein. This comes a day before the U.S. Justice Department was set to release the unclassified files from its ongoing investigation of Epstein. Now, from the latest batch of images, some 68 are among the 95,000 images released to the House Oversight Committee earlier. The images show redacted identification cards of women suspected to be belonging to countries such as Russia, Morocco, Italy, Czech Republic, South Africa, Lithuania, and Ukraine. Moreover, the new images also picture billionaire Microsoft founder Bill Gates, professor and political activist Noam Chomsky, and US President Donald Trump's former aide Steve Bannon. And I request Professor Johnston to join us back in the discussion here. Professor, it was just last week when the images were released about 19 photos, and Trump had said it's not a big deal. How should we see his statement?
Well, Donald is who I've known and covered for almost 38 years and spent hundreds of hours with him. Donald is someone who acts in the moment. And so he'll tell you one thing one moment, he'll tell you the opposite a minute later, and then insist that he never said one of the two statements. He's trying very desperately to figure out how to tamp down the disclosures that are going to come out of the Epstein files, or to hold back one way or another things that would be damaging to him. Now, there's no evidence at this point of him committing any crimes against girls who are under the age of consent, but there are a number of other than the sworn testimony of about 24 young women who say that they were raped or molested.
In fact, to add on to that, survivors are also voicing concern over selective release of these images by the House Democrats. Would you want to add to that?
Well, the Democrats are trying to drip out photographs. They've released a couple hundred so far out of an estimated 95,000 photographs and videos. And they're simply trying to keep the pressure up and the public interest involved to see to it that there's a full disclosure of what went on, why Jeffrey Epstein got his sweetheart deal from federal prosecutors years ago, and why law enforcement was blind to something that was so obvious, including, it turns out, a document that Chase Bank approved the transfer of money about an underage girl, and it said purchase, that basically this girl was sold. Nobody in the compliance department at the bank said, wait a minute, what in the world does this say?
Yeah.
And the Democrats are hoping to make hay out of this to damage Donald Trump.
All right. Thank you, Professor Johnston, for joining us. For now, we appreciate you taking time to speak to us. And moving on, we have some more news from the United States. In the latest development from the Brown University mass shooting, we are now learning that the suspect has been discovered dead in a storage facility in New Hampshire. Police officials say that the suspect, who they have identified as Claudio Manuel Neves Valente, might have appeared to die from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Claudio, who was 48 years old, was last seen in Miami. Officials report that he had no current affiliation with the university, but was enrolled at the university from the fall of 2000 to the spring of 2001 in a PhD program. Moreover, officials have also added that the suspect appears to be connected to the fatal shooting of an MIT professor that happened in Brooklyn this week. Now, the mass shooting at Brown University took place last weekend, killing 2 students and injuring 9 others. 2 students who lost their lives were identified as Ella Cook, who was a sophomore from Alabama, and Muhammad Aziz Umurozkov, who was an Uzbek national in his first year at Brown. And I now request Matthew Whedon, who's an American author and journalist, to join us in this discussion. He joins us from Washington. Thank you very much, Matthew, for joining us this morning in India and speaking to us. Matthew, now there has been a statement from a U.S. attorney who's saying that the suspect was also behind the killing of an MIT professor earlier this week. Would you say it was a hate attack?
That it was a what attack?
A hate attack?
I don't know if it's, you mean if it was motivated by political ideology or by race or anything like that? I don't think enough is known about the suspect yet. The one, there has been some speculation that there might have been some sort of a political motive because I think the lady, the unfortunate young woman who was killed, Ella Cook, was some kind of a conservative or a Republican activist. And so that has led to speculation that she was targeted for her political activities. But I don't know if that allegation has been developed beyond that point. So it's a bit early to say that this, in the absence of concrete evidence, that this was, motivated by hatred of someone based on politics or race or what or sexual orientation or what have you.
Now we're also picking up details about the suspect's enrollment in the university himself. Would you want to elaborate on that?
That he was enrolled at the university. Well, if
Briefly
there've
for
been reports.
about a year.
Well, there've been reports that he was enrolled in the university and that he was not happy there, and that he was angry about his treatment there, and that maybe he was seeking some sort of revenge against Brown University. Again, I don't know if anything has been developed, any facts have been developed beyond that initial disclosure. So, in the early stages after a crime has happened, after a shooting has happened, we're basically sitting around scratching our heads wondering what is going on, and it takes time, to develop concrete facts. Just like after Charlie Kirk's shooting in September, it took a couple of days before before it became evident that this was an attack based on the alleged shooter's hatred of Charlie Kirk's political views. So these things take a few days, and I know everybody likes to go on TV and offer their pet theories, but I about what happened and what motivated it. But I think in the absence of actual evidence, we should hold off on doing that.
Well, indeed. Thank you, Matthew, for giving your perspective on that. We do stay on. Viewers, let's also tell you, the US military has said that it carried out kinetic strikes on 2 more vessels suspected of smuggling drugs in the Eastern Pacific. The US Southern Command has stated that a total of 5 male narco-terrorists were killed during these actions, as 3 in the first vessel and 2 in the second vessel, and no US military forces personnel were harmed. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has said that he does not need congressional approval to launch strikes on land against Venezuela. Despite the criticism that Trump is already exceeding his constitutional authority with attacks at the sea. However, the US has conducted multiple airstrikes against alleged drug trafficking boats in the Caribbean and Pacific since September, killing at least 100 people. The Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has claimed that the US campaign seeks a change of regime instead of its stated goal of stopping drug trafficking. All right, I request Matthew to join us back into the discussion here.
Sure, hi.
Hi, Matthew. Matthew, every new information, every new attack, and one thing is clear, that these boats were only suspected, alleged to be carrying or transporting drugs. Only based on suspicion, only based on allegations. How are these strikes valid? Over 100 people killed up until now.
Well, the U.S. military has been under orders to use its intelligence gathering capabilities to target vessels at sea that appear to be involved in transporting drugs, and that's what it's been doing. And there's been a lot of criticism um, in the United States, in the U.S. Congress, and outside the United States, that the that just as you mentioned, that there is no that there isn't proof, or there isn't much proof that these people were involved in trafficking drugs. We've seen photos of a lot of these vessels, largely speedboats, and Venezuela has claimed that some of them were fishing boats, which, it doesn't prove, just because of, they're using a speedboat, that doesn't prove that they're, that they're transporting drugs.
Yes.
But they're probably not going fishing if they're using speedboats, because fishing vessels, fishing trawlers, and the like don't look like that. So I think that the U.S. military has some reason to believe that it's targeting the right vessels, and people are skeptical of this, and think it would be better to actually apprehend the individuals, seize the vessels, and bring these people in and try them under in the courts. That would be the better option, rather than just blowing up anything that looks like a speedboat. There was an effort just the other day to try and restrain the president with a so-called war powers resolution in Congress, but it narrowly failed. And there may be more attempts in the future to try to restrain him, but that's very difficult to do with the president, because he has this emergency authority to use the military to protect the United States. And his argument is that these alleged drug boats, are carrying drugs that will reach the United States, and so he has a moral, if not a legal, right to stop them. And that may be tested again in the future. As I said, they may have more war powers resolutions in Congress trying to limit President Trump's authority. It is definitely having an impact on Venezuela, which is having a lot of difficulty selling its
sorry to interrupt you there,
sanctioned
but
oil.
does Trump even have the constitutional authority to carry out these strikes? And why conduct strikes? Why not just capture these suspected drug trafficking boats?
Well, this is a tricky area of constitutional law. The president is commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces. That means he has the authority to command soldiers and sailors and Marines and sometimes National Guardsmen and so on, and Coast Guard personnel, to take offensive, physical actions against perceived enemies. And he has this authority, I guess you could say, on an interim basis. He can do it until Congress says he can't. And Congress is usually very reluctant to tie a president's hands. People complained about, for example, President Barack Obama's attacks on North African countries and so on, and during the so-called Arab Spring some years ago, but ultimately the president, the Congress didn't do anything to stop him. And so, because the president has this presumptive authority to act, subject to Congress putting curbs on his authority to act, he can go forward and do these things. If the weight of public opinion turns against him, though, as it may be starting to do, then he is going to feel some pressure to not do this anymore. But right now it looks like he's not feeling a lot of pressure, and that he is quite confident that he's doing the right thing, and he's probably going to continue. The purpose of attacking these alleged drug boats in the eastern Pacific Ocean and in the Caribbean Sea around South America is really, I mean, obviously the idea is to force regime change in Venezuela, and I think that the drug war justification is secondary here. I think President Trump really does want to combat illegal drugs, but I think first and foremost he wants the government of Venezuela to be replaced. He wants the communist, the socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro out of power. He said that he wants the U.S. Oil companies' property, assets that were seized in Venezuela, to be returned to them. And President Trump is hoping to install a Venezuelan government that is more favorable to U.S. interests. And he may not say that outright, but it's pretty clear that is what he's trying to do.
Well, that's also what Maduro is saying. But thank you for sharing all that information with us, Matthew, and for joining us. And viewers, before we wrap up this bulletin, let's tell you some more news. The focus of the United States space program has been shifted back to the moon, as Donald Trump has confirmed plans to send American astronauts to the lunar surface as soon as possible, pushing ambitions for Mars further into the future. Under a new executive order, a return to the moon by 2028 has been outlined through NASA's Artemis program, first launched during Trump's initial term. The move has been described as a step to assert U.S. leadership in space, support lunar economic development, prepare for future Mars travel, and inspire younger generations. Plans have also been laid out for the creation of initial elements of a permanent lunar outpost by 2030, along with the deployment of nuclear reactors on the moon and in orbit. While a crewed landing is currently scheduled for 2027, further delays are widely expected as SpaceX's lunar lander remains under development. The move is also being viewed as a response to growing competition from China, which aims to place astronauts on the moon by 2030. And unfortunately, running short on time for this bulletin, but do keep watching NewsX World as we come back with more news and updates from around the world.